Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Only Yesterday from 1991. And this is continuing my series where I try to review all of the films of Studio Ghibli. And this is a film directed by Isao Takahata. It is actually his first real major success. Grave of the Fireflies and Totoro, that double feature, didn't do very well at the box office. But Only Yesterday was a huge hit in Japan and was actually the #1 box office draw in 1991. Even though it's kind of a slice of life character study, it actually was a tremendous box office success, which is surprising after you see the movie. It doesn't look like a film you'd expect to be a very audience-friendly big movie, but it's still a very good movie. Takahata, people have compared him to Ozu and Bergman and kind of these slowed down slice of life films, but I think what Takahata does with this film is do something that no one thought anyone could do with animation, which is similar to what he did with Grave of the Fireflies. And I know I keep coming back to this with him, but I think it's important to note when he started out, he really wanted to change animation and make it more for adults. And it seems as soon as he had his own studio, the two films he decided to make were two films that weren't based on source materials that you would think would be animated films. You would think they would be live action films and not, very fantastical, very kind of stripped down, slower, slice of life type of films. Not the kind of ideas and the kind of scripts and source materials you'd expect for an animated film. And Takahata continued that with Only Yesterday. But he kind of finds a way to make animation really work for this film. Where this film almost feels like not as much of a shocking adaptation as like Grave of the Fireflies is. I think Grave of the Fireflies is just like, how did someone decide to make that animated, make that amazing? How he does it, I think, makes it feel more organic, and it shows how he got even better as an animation director since then. One of the things I love about watching the Studio Ghibli films in order is I was familiar with Miyazaki. I really wasn't as familiar with Takahata's work. And through watching these, I've been able to discover another great animation director. And I think when you talk about Studio Ghibli, it's so easy to get lost in Totoro and Kiki and Spirited Away and all those things. And those are great movies, and I love Miyazaki. Clearly, that's why I'm doing this. But I think throughout seeing Takahata's work, it kind of makes me want to see more of his films. And I think Only Yesterday is another example of a work that, unfortunately, although it's not released in America, so that's probably primarily why, but a lot of his filmography isn't available in America. And looking at a film like this, it makes it even more of a shame as I see more and more films from him. In 1982, a woman who is a 27-year-old office worker in Tokyo decides to go on a vacation and goes to the countryside to work in the fields and pick soap flour that they use to make like dye and rouge and things like that, while she's recalling memories from when she was 10 years old in the 5th grade in 1966. And as this film cuts back between the two, the 1982 animation style is different from the 1966 animation style. The animation style of the kids is more of kind of a traditional anime children and character designs, really what you'd expect from an anime. And then the 1982 storyline is done to be more realistic. And they actually recorded the voices in different ways for both. Most of the time in anime, they actually record the voices after the animation and change the lips after that. In this film, what they did is they recorded the voices for the realistic part first, and then did the voices for the younger kids later, so they had different feels to them. It really works for it. The more cartoony style of the 1966 storyline makes it a little more fun. It's sometimes a little jarring, and I think the 1982 version can be too serious in some parts. Although I think the style works with that. I've noticed in other reviews people complain about the part where the guy who she's kind of falling in love with in the 1982 storyline talks about how if you look out at nature, all this was done by farmers, this was done by man. Everyone looks out on that would think of nature. And I actually thought that was actually interesting. It's like, if I had seen that, I would go, oh, this is amazing nature, but it's actually man-made. It's man working with nature, as he explained. I actually thought that was interesting. But there's some times where she's recalling things and talking about things that it gets just a little too much for me. frankly. I think the film works for what Takahata is trying to do, and I think it's actually a really good film. It reminds me of sometimes you're on a trip or there's a period in your life where you keep thinking about moments in your childhood. You keep thinking back on a certain instance in your life or a certain event or year in your life, and you keep rehashing it in your mind. And I've had times like that in my own life where you're just like constantly just internally thinking about something, and that's a really interesting thing to tackle. Takahata is really kind of the perfect director to do something like that because he's a lot more subdued, he's more thoughtful than a lot of directors. He can use the kind of poetic, symbolic nature to work within his story and really have it play off one another. And even though the older version, the 1982 version, you're kind of going through what she analyzes it to be, you're not beholden to that. There's a lot of ways to think about this film. I think that is one of the things that makes Takahata so special. He's not trying to make a film for kids. This was groundbreaking because no one thought you could make kind of a slower character piece about a 27-year-old woman and make it animated and make it so commercial. Kiki is a great movie, and I like Kiki's Delivery Service a lot more than this, but Only Yesterday is far more adventurous. It's doing something that animation doesn't really do. A flying witch delivery service is a little more what you'd expect from animation. Just the idea of something and the execution doesn't necessarily make it a good movie. But the way he weaves the two storylines for the most part in this film is pretty stunning to watch. Bringing yourself into someone's internal thought process throughout a film is an interesting one to do. It almost does have a very kind of comic booky feel. That's one thing that comic book movies never had, is the thought bubble. And movies don't usually have that. It's based on a manga of the same name. Takahata found a way to visually make it work with the two different styles. And I liked seeing someone in 5th grade and her learning about menstruation and her liking a boy and dealing with her father and her sisters and not doing good at school. And I actually found when I was watching this film, maybe this is a weird thing to admit to, but when I was watching Only Yesterday, I kept thinking of my own life when I was a kid and how that has affected who I am and what my life has become and my memories then. And it felt very human in that way that I could relate to Only Yesterday. I guess in that way I kind of understand how it became a hit, because there's no way you're not gonna think about yourself while you're watching it, which slightly, I will admit, took me out of it because I'm selfishly thinking about myself and not watching this great animated movie. But I still really like the experience of it. I was kind of shocked by how it could really get me to do something that I already have done before, but illustrate something that I don't think you'd think of with a film. You could think of The Wonder Years or something like that, but to have the both going on and show like she was at both times at a crossroads, where she was at the kind of the end of adolescence in 5th grade, and this when she's at a crossroads in her adult life. After he tackled something as heavy as Grave of the Fireflies, this doesn't feel as monumental of an achievement, but I think he still is going at it the same kind of theory he's always had, of putting animation into places that it hasn't gone before. And Only Yesterday definitely does that, and it shows that with Takahata. The score is a little different. I guess they're not called needle drops, but it's like George Lucas's American Graffiti, where they have music is from like the radio, and in Only Yesterday the music is from the TV or from the time period or from the radio. And so the score is not very Ghibli. Takahata is an interesting animation director. I like that he does character studies. He's done that before with Gochu the Cellist, and semi with Grave of the Fireflies, but I don't think that, I wouldn't really classify that as a character study, but I would say Shay the Brat is as well. And it seems like he likes doing films like that. He likes kind of sitting down with a few characters and really exploring them. Ghibli in itself is good at following characters. The whole studio is very good at following characters. And at the beginning, I didn't really know much about Only Yesterday, to be honest with you. This is the first time I had ever seen it. And it took me a little bit to understand the structure of it and everything, but as I did, I understood both the little girl and the older woman obviously is the same person, but those distinct characters, because you're kind of different people between when you're like 10 and when you're 27. So, or at least I hope you are. I don't think it's as significant as some of his other films, certainly. It is still a significant film. It's a hard thing to follow up Grave of the Fireflies. I still think this is a very great film, and I understand what it achieved, and I can talk about how it achieved that. I don't know if I'm as in love with it. I did like how it did the movie keeps going during the credits thing that Kiki's Delivery Service did as well. I don't know how long Studio Ghibli did that for, but I hope a lot of people don't stop this movie before it keeps going during the credits, so you probably will keep watching it, but it's interesting that they would keep it going, and that seemed to be a theme that Studio Ghibli at least liked to do, and it adds kind of an extra flair and kind of a studio thing. Takahata was someone who liked to pick different kinds of stories for animated films, and he seemed to moving further and further away from what he should do as an animated director, and I think after Grave of the Fireflies, I don't think he wanted to go right back to what he should do, and Only Yesterday really wasn't, and that's what's so amazing about it. I think sometimes it can get a little heavy-handed, but Only Yesterday is still a significant achievement in animation and for Takahata. And it's a pretty special and interesting character study about someone studying their own character from their past. And that's kind of an interesting internal struggle to watch on screen and done through the art of animation with Takahata and Studio Ghibli. So if you have seen Only Yesterday and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And if you'd like to check out my other Studio Ghibli reviews, there'll be an annotation on the screen right now, and you can click on that playlist. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.